So cat is going on. This is the cat number 6. I personally want to share something. I feel the cats can be more or less pussycats and more active cats, and being somehow also able to see forces, to combine forces, to combine energies. But this is my wish, what a great outer world together could be. But it's a wish list from my side, so we see what the divine is giving us. So, most welcome again.
So welcome everybody today. Today we have Jean-François Noubel, who is going to give a series of sessions on collective intelligence for evolutionary transformation. And we in the council, we have been working with him and we feel very inspired. And he has been invited by the council, and we feel like sharing his knowledge and growing with it along with the community. So that is the purpose of this sharing today. And now I'll hand over to Sandhira to also welcome you and welcome Jean-François Noubel.
Welcome everybody, my name is Sandhira, and I am really inspired by Jean-François Noubel and by the opportunities the Council got to work together with him. So the next following sessions will be a deepening of each of that, and one which is not announced on this cat little advertisement. It's a cat on the 24th on economy. And the reason is why, because we really want to have people who are interested in this topic for Oroville, to move something in Oroville and create that togetherness, that we create a hub who really stands for the shift. So whoever is here from Oroville, if you have anybody, please come to this economic topic on the 24th from 4 to 6:30, and you can pass on the message. It will not be published in news and notes. It's okay. And I'm now just don't want to lose time, just want to pass it over to Jean-François Noubel. Enjoy.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Why don't we begin with like a couple of minutes of centering meditation? Do you feel okay with that? Yeah. To get really presence, to build our space? Yes? Okay, so I'll sit and spend a couple of minutes like this. Thank you. Thank you very much. So I will share today, as much as I can, I will share something about my passion, collective intelligence. I had this passion a long time ago. First, as a child at school, not understanding how society would work and why school would work this way and why society would work this way and why religions would work this way and such and such. And some years ago, about 17, 18 years ago, I decided that I would really fully devote my life after a very diverse life before, professional life, adventurous life in the world. I decided I would devote my life to research in collective intelligence. And so I came here invited by Orovillians to explore this question, and we'll do this through different sessions. This first session, I will kind of put on the table some very fundamental information, facts, concept about collective intelligence. I would say maybe a little more in the mental side. Okay, so we have tools, we have language, and I'll explain more about that. The second session next Sunday, we will go very practical. We will go in the body. We will see why and how the collective operates in our individual body, that we have a social body, and how if we change some things, then we can change the collective in return. So we'll go into this next Sunday. And the Sunday after that, we will go more into the now what question. You will have had quite some material to process, mental, intellectual, physical, emotional, spiritual, and we will have this session, the last one, to really explore the question, now what for Aurovilians? What kind of practical social design do they think of? How do they want to redesign themselves also in regards to the collective, things like that. And then we'll also have one last session on the 24th, Tuesday the 24th, where we will go into a very specific topic about gift economy. And I'll speak also a little bit about that today, because I live myself in the gift economy, and I explore that as a living system. And what if Auroville, or when will Auroville evolve into gift economy, and what does it take as social design? What does it take as technologies? How do we need to rethink our reality and things like that? So we'll do that in this very, very last session. But today I would like really to share with you the foundations of collective intelligence. And you can look at it from two sides. The first side, you don't have life without collective intelligence. It just doesn't work. Look at these fishes here, our cells making our bodies, 30,000 billion cells together, a flock of birds, the big herds, a jazz band, a sports team, a multinational, Auroville. All of these represent different forms of collective intelligence. So you can't have life without being collaborating together, just that. So you can't see collective intelligence as a methodology. You don't say, let's do collective intelligence. Just like in physics, you don't say, let's do gravity. It just exists. And then you can improve, you can work on that, you can learn from that, but you don't do collective intelligence. But also collective intelligence has turned into a research field that tries to understand why, when we have a group of people together, sometimes something magical can happen and we have an emerging whole, something that works as a social body, that has congruency, that sees itself, that can operate in complexity, that can sustain itself, and so on. And why and when it doesn't work. And we explore this field not only in humankind, but in all living systems. That means ecosystems out there, animals, plankton, bacteria, microbes, everything, cells, everything. And that provides us today with a new language of social engineering, a language of social engineering. Why? You see, before that, we had a language for politics, we had a language for corporate life, we had a language to talk about family, we had a language to talk about school, kind of pockets here and there, okay? We had the language to talk about animal behavior, but we didn't have some kind of encompassing big language that helped us understand the whole tapestry of life, how it works socially. And if we have this kind of language, then that can become very useful for people like you who want to build something new. How can we build something new if we don't have a specialized language, a language of social engineering? How can we make airplanes fly if we just keep using conventional language? They will never fly. We need a language that understands the physics of flying. And so we need a language that understands the physics of making new social organisms. And I see everywhere people trying to make something new, but they still use the old language. They don't have a practical or engineering language, social engineering language, and they fail. They fail at making the new. Another thing that really pushed me so much in the passion about collective intelligence, it comes from the fact that I travel a lot in the world, I see lots of amazing human beings, just like you in this room. And each of them have done an amazing amount of personal development. They really commit themselves to growth, to transforming themselves. They meditate, they work on their body, they work on their food, they build awareness about how they behave, they dig into their own history, you know, things like that, and then transform themselves. But they put them together in the same room, and they keep building the old, same world. And that hurts. Something happens that does not only belong to personal transformation. It seems that when you put people they all want to go in this direction, and you put them together, and they may go in this direction together. And each of them have the pure, perfect intention to go there. And each of them have done amazing personal development, so they build capacity to go there. But together, they won't. So something happens, not at the personal level, but at the collective level, that may keep the collective back into the old world. And that may keep people who want to build the new, but eventually they will build the old again and again and again. And that really became a very central question for me. And it led to a very fascinating discoveries. Why do these things happen? Why does the whole does not represent the sum of the parts, but may create something completely different? And I will share lots of things with you today about this. But before I go into this part, I think we will go into a better understanding if I begin by sharing with you what we mean by collective intelligence, and mostly the different forms of collective intelligence that exist in the world. 4 of them, so not many of them, but 4 of them. And once we understand those different forms of collective intelligence, then we can really see in which one do we operate in the present moment, how they work, and what can we do with this form of collective intelligence, and what can't we not do with this form of collective intelligence, even if we want it individually, but the form will not allow for it, okay? So, do you feel okay if I share this first part, 4 forms? Let's go for it. Okay? So you got the first one here. First one, that we call swarm collective intelligence. So here you have not a swarm of fish, you have a school of fish, okay, but it says the same thing. I could have shown an ant colony, or a big herd, or a big flock of birds, It says the same thing. A big number of individuals, but at the individual level, they don't have much freedom. This fish here follows all the other fish and has almost the same biological design, okay? And same for an ant colony or termites, okay? Or those big herds, every animal goes in the same kind of direction. They don't have much freedom individually. However, collectively, it can build a very, very, very smart and flexible collective. Look at the individual ant. We can almost predict or simulate the behavior of an ant with a computer. But at the emergent collective level, you have something super smart called an ant colony. So this one probably comes from the oldest form of collective intelligence. When you have those big numbers, they gather together, and together they can really accomplish much more things. But remember, not much individual freedom. Now we human come from... Oh, sorry, I wanted to ask you about this one. You see, this one we also have it in our humanity here. When you have a big street protest, or you hear the New York Marathon, you have 50,000 people running in the same direction, okay? And something that happens in big cities, this, all right? So our species knows about swarm collective intelligence, but in very specific conditions, okay? Not every day, we don't live like this, but sometimes we find ourselves trapped in our car, very frustrated because we lose freedom, but at the collective level, we see a city that fills in and fills out every day. Try to plan that. Very hard. So you see, we experience that kind of collective intelligence. But mostly we come from a different form of collective intelligence, the second one, that we call original collective intelligence. We originally come here. Our origins come from this kind of collective intelligence, kind of the opposite of the previous one. Because here you have a small number of individuals, but with a big level of freedom, lots of plasticity. Every monkey here can do lots and lots of different things, much more than an ant, much more than a fish that we saw in the school of fish, okay? And look also, observe your emotions when you see this. When you see those monkeys, and I could have shown you, you know, dolphins or elephants or big cats, you know, but observe those monkeys here. Don't we connect with them immediately? Like, don't we try to read what they experience in the group? We have some kind of group reading here immediately, which we can't have with the school of fish. Okay, so it shows that we have a brain made for that. And if I now go into the human world, just observe this picture that I love so much, a jazz band. You have an example of a very functional, original collective intelligence. What do you see here? I would like to hear from you. What do you see? How would you comment this picture? What does it tell you?
Playing music together.
Mm-hmm. Harmony, yes.
Everyone's got a special talent.
Everyone has a special talent. True, yes.
Listening to the others.
Listening to the others. Uh-huh. Yes?
They're playing to each other's beat.
Right, so they synchronize, right? Yes, absolutely. Anything else?
For me, the woman just draws my attention. She's the only woman there, but she's really part of the whole group.
Uh-huh. Actually, you have two women. The pianist.
And the other one. Pianist is a woman. Okay?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I see only one.
Right. And
Concentration on everyone's face.
right, concentration, the presence, the involvement. Exactly. So you see, we can immediately connect to that emotionally, and we can read what happens because we have our brains really made for this kind of setting. Okay, and so all the properties that you named, absolutely right. You know, transparency, synchronization, empathy, specialization, all these things. Plus one, very important, that we call holopticism. Holopticism. Holos, the whole, holistic, the whole, and opticism, see the whole. Every player knows what to do because they see the whole. They don't need to operate in a blind chain of command. They know what to do because they have this training to see the whole. And what makes a good player here comes from two qualities, two conditions. One, back to the picture, they need to play their instrument well. Okay, and football or whatever sports, they need to play the ball well, okay? But the second thing also, they need to become good holopticians. It takes a training for that. If you don't know jazz, you may just hear mess. If you don't know, I don't know, American football or rugby, you may just see like a big mess, okay? And why some people they love to go and see the football match. They don't play the ball, but they love to see that because we love to experience the link between the individual and the collective. We love to see that. And as witnesses, we enjoy the sports or the jazz band as holopticians. Okay? And by the way, if we talk about sports, the coach on the side, he doesn't play the ball, but he facilitates the link between the individual level and the collective level. So you see, we have something very important here and I'll come back to that later, but we have a very important question because we have a functional whole where people know what to do because yes, they learn how to become master at something, to master something, but also because they can connect to the whole that informs them about what they can do, and so they will do something which will transform the whole, which will then inform them to do something, and so on. So you have a complex dynamic system, a complex self-mirroring system, individual level and collective level. Now I have a question for you. When does it stop working? It has two limitations. When it stops working, it can't work anymore, our jazz band. Any idea?
There is a disconnect.
So if they disconnect, but how would they disconnect, for instance?
The individual is not relating to the collective.
Yes, distance, number one. Right, which creates distance, some kind of distance that would create a disconnection. So, you want to say something?
When you start to focus on individual performance,
Uh-huh.
when you disconnect from the whole, as you said, the own performance, you're
Right.
focused on that.
Yes?
When we don't listen to each other anymore.
If they don't listen to each other anymore. Okay. So let me help with the question, because any group can have dysfunctionalities, just like my body can become ill or something, you know, I can have cancer or things like that. And living systems can also become ill. But I ask about a specific kind of limitation that doesn't come from a dysfunction, but just something that they can't do. Yes? Size. Right. The second one. Okay? So distance. They need to remain connected, and size. In nature, if you have a group of elephants or big cats, and it becomes too big, what happens?
They split.
Right, they split. Exactly. And they make more and more everywhere. Okay. Now, in our jazz band, if we have too many players, what happens? So they can split, or chaos, or yes. And we go into philharmonic orchestra, for instance. We go into something different. Because if we have too many players, that becomes too complex. We have too much social complexity. Now let me show you an example through sports. Not a very good image here because I had to extract that from a TV documentary, but you will see here the training it takes for football players, the sense of the body that they make together when they play. Look at that. So they run, and you see they build a sense of geometrical forms like polygons that they make. Okay, they really build through their training, and their trainer, their coach, really helps them to understand, to see all possibilities, makes either lines of attack or lines of defense. And trained players have this really this feeling, they just don't play individually. They have the feeling that they make something together. They build shapes, they build collective shapes, or triangles to open more possibilities, and so on and so on, which then builds very advanced strategies. You see lines of defense and triangles and things like that, okay? So advanced players and the coach, they see that. They see the game this way. If you don't know the game that much, then you just see, well, people running, maybe some beautiful things to see, but not at this level of holopticism, okay? So we see those two limitations, number and distance. And that speaks to the first global crisis that humanity met a long time ago. Imagine more and more villages because of agriculture. So you have an explosion of population. Okay? And those small villages become big villages and small towns and big towns. And you have more and more labor specialization, okay? More and more social complexity. And at this point, orality, oral traditions, that kind of biological technology cannot work anymore to deal with the level of social complexity that we have in this time. So either we go in a big chaos, or maybe a big collapse, or something happens. And something happened. What happened? A new technology.
Writing.
The writing. Exactly. The writing. Because with the writing, we don't need to stand in the same space and time anymore. With the writing, it can travel very far. You don't need to stand near my voice. And it can travel through space as well. We still read today things that people wrote thousands of years ago. Okay? So the writing allowed a quantum leap into social complexity. And because of that, humanity could enter into what we call history, because we define history and prehistory, but history at the beginning of the writing. And we enter into the third form of collective intelligence, that we call pyramidal collective intelligence. Since the writing, any medium-sized or big organization will take this shape, pyramidal collective intelligence. So it began with civilizations, big civilizations with, at the top, wow, I don't have a good image here. It doesn't really reflect what I have on the computer. Anyway, so at the top you have, an emperor or a pharaoh or someone very, very powerful. And then underneath that you have priests and nobles. And then underneath that you have the merchants, the teachers, the scribes, and so on. And underneath you have more people working on the land or the herds as well. And at the bottom you have lots and lots of people, unskilled workers, slaves, prisoners of wars, untouchable, any category of population that you can use as much as you want, okay? And even today we may say, well, okay, we don't have this anymore. Well, do we? Maybe, huh? Right? I mean, people with huge amount of maybe financial power, huge chains of command, and zillions of people doing low-wage labor just to survive, so they can come back to work the next day, right? But if I take it in a more neutral way, pyramidal collective intelligence works this way. It works as a kind of pile or pyramid of original collective intelligence. You see here you would have people at the top of a company, for instance, okay? The directors and the VPs, okay? And then you have departments here. And then you have services here. And so on. And then you have branches and so on and so on. Same for a state, a nation state. You would have ministries and services and so on and so on, okay? So since the invention of the writing, every medium-sized or big organization works this way. And it has 4 characteristics. And I'll name them because if we understand them, then we'll start to understand lots of things about Auroville as well. First one, labor division. First one, concentration of power. A few people deciding at the top, okay? Elected, not elected, it doesn't matter. Just a few people in charge of the big decisions at the top. Second, you have labor division. You kind of break down all the tasks all along to the bottom of the pyramid. The third one, you have a chain of command. You better have a chain of command so that, so if someone says, do this at the top, then it will get executed, okay? And the fourth one, more complex, what we call a scarce currency. A scarce currency, otherly called money. Why do we call money in economics? We call it a scarce currency because most people in the population will experience scarcity. They won't have enough to fulfill their needs. They won't have enough to engage economically with their peers. They will lack money, and that will create a hierarchy of needs and a hierarchy of dependency that exactly serves the purpose of pyramidal collective intelligence. Let me go a little deeper on that, because here we touch very important point, and you will see how it connects to big questions about Auroville. Who has played the Monopoly game? Raise your hand. Okay, all right, so almost everyone. Okay. When we play the Monopoly game, we start with an equal world, right? Everyone has the same amount of money. Okay, roll the dice a little bit, and then you go on a square and you buy or you don't buy, you make decisions, and you have a little bit of randomness with the cards that you take and so on. But sooner or later, if I play, for instance, as a player, the more money I have, the more I can invest. The more I can invest, the more I get. The more I get, the more I can invest. The more I invest, the more I get, and so on. So it says, the more I have, and the more I have. Okay? The less money I have, the more I have to pay others a rent. So the less money I have, the less money I have, the less money I have. Okay? So you have different exponential curves. The curve of the winner that will go whoop, 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 and then skyrocket to lots and lots of money. And the curves of the losers that will get whoop, 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 bankrupt, whoop, whoop, bankrupt, and bankrupt. Okay? It happens this way. So I said winners and losers. So who wins in the Monopoly game? The richer. Sure? Certain about that? Well, the rules say so. But in games theory, we call it a collective death game. A collective death game. Because even if I have all the banknotes, all the players cannot exchange anymore, so they died, and I die too. Because I have no more to play with. Okay, so I may have all the piles of banknotes, but I die just like others. Okay? So the game has to stop, unless we decide to redistribute everything, or unless we decide to change the rules. Maybe we want to design another currency system, okay? But if we just play by the rules, then the game will come to an end, and mostly it will have people will have what we call a concentration of money, or more precisely, in technical terms, a condensation of money. And that, we call it the Pareto effect. Have you heard about Pareto effect? The 80-20 law?
How do you spell it?
P-A-R-E-T-O, Pareto. Vilfredo Pareto, an Italian sociologist and economist, traveled in many countries, and he realized something very strange. He saw that regardless, the tax system, the political system, the climate, the resources of the country, the belief system, the religious system, whatever, it would not influence, or very poorly influence, the distribution of money in the country. And he wrote those equations called the Pareto equations, that explains exactly this phenomenon of condensation. Money condensates in the hands of a few. Hence, the rest of the population experiences scarcity, just like in the Monopoly game. You still have access to material wealth. You still know how to work. You still know how to plant things. You still know how to engineer things. But it doesn't flow with others. You can't exchange with others, not because of the lack of wealth, but because of the lack of tokens that represent this wealth. We call it under-monetization. And hence the reason why we call money, among millions of different forms of currencies, different rules we could design, but we have always played with one since the invention of pyramidal collective intelligence, we call money a scarce currency. Also a debt-based currency. Because when I have, a $1 or 100 rupees banknote in my hands, it means someone has to give me something. It represents a debt. Okay, we also call it a debt money. So back to pyramidal collective intelligence. You will see in every forms of pyramidal collective intelligence, since ages forever, a correlation between concentration of money and concentration of power. Where you have the concentration of money, you have the concentration of power. Where do we see the money here? At the top or the bottom? At the top, right? And so, you see, I seem like having an opinion about that, but actually I don't have an opinion about that. It serves perfectly the purpose of pyramidal structures. If you want a pyramidal structure, use money as a technology for, tracking wealth. If you want a distributed organization, then money may cause some problems, and we'll talk about that in the next phase, okay? But so, back to what I said, pyramidal collective intelligence has concentration of power, labor division, chain of command, and scarce currency as the main signature of all pyramidal structures that you will see in the world. Now, what happened thousands of years ago, the big crisis, like oral traditions would not work, overpopulation, social complexity, it happens again today. We enter exactly in this phase where all this pyramidal collective intelligence in the world has created so much social complexity and works as the cost, lots of human cost as well, that something new has to happen. No way pyramidal collective intelligence will ever solve complex problems like global warming and social complexity and economics and employment and health and food and all these things. Actually, it produces those negative outcomes. So we can't ask pyramidal collective intelligence to deal with the problems that we have today. And we can see it as a bad news, and it also has some good news, like Auroville, like people like you in the world who gather because they want to build something new. And they do it from both sides. They do it from a very practical side, like they know that the nation-state, top-down, pyramidal structure won't work anymore, and they can only work at the cost of personal, individual sovereignty. They can only work because you believe in a one-fit-for-all kind of ideology. So they have a practical response to that, but at the same time they have a spiritual awakening to that as well. And what I find so interesting, as one of my big aha moments in my research, it came when I saw that the research that I do in collective intelligence completely matched the insights from Shira Aurobindo and the mother. They saw it from the inward consciousness and the involution process. And I can see it as a researcher from the outside as well. Like now, a big shift needs to happen, and it happens, and it leads to the fourth form of collective intelligence. This one. The fourth form that we call holomidal, that means holistic, holos, the same root, holomidal structure, holistic structure, holomidal collective intelligence. The internet. The networks of people, well, if you just look at people connected to Auroville, involved in some way or another to Auroville, you would have something like this. You don't have, like a bricks and mortar structure with a name on it and, a bank account and all these things. You have a network, a very complex web of people across the world connected to Auroville. We call it holomidal collective intelligence. Okay? So what do we know about this kind of collective intelligence? Well, first we can see it, we can sense it by just looking at this picture here. I have a question for you. On one side, you have pyramidal collective intelligence, and on the other side, you have holomidal collective intelligence. You may not see it very well here, but you have thousands and thousands of links of threads between those dots here, and each of them represent a person, an image of a small image, thumbnail of a person, okay? So one of them represents pyramidal collective intelligence, and another one represents holomidal. Which one? For instance, the left one, pyramidal or holomidal? Why?
It looks unitive.
Yes.
The other one looks dispersed.
Uh-huh.
More chaos. The one on the left has a sense of harmony. There's not an interlink.
Sorry, can you speak?
Only a few interlinkages between individuals.
Yes. Without doing strong mathematics or complex mathematics, just looking at pictures helps us understand the difference. Even you don't have a pyramid shown here on the left, but you can already see that it works through silos. Some parts don't communicate together. Some parts do and some parts don't. Okay, and you don't have that many connections here, but here. The one on the right, you have many, many, many connections. So we have super connected social organisms that emerge. And the technology that allows that doesn't come from the writing as we knew it. It comes from what we call socialware and communityware. That means these technologies, these online technologies that allow to deal with social complexity. And not just email, of course, but all the software to build a collective memory like Wikipedia, software to make complex projects, software to do conflict resolution, software to make for decision making, things like that. Okay, and this thing allow the rise of very complex social organisms, sometimes local and sometimes global, and most of them don't even have a name. They just exist. They assemble, they self-organize themselves. Yes?
Just to understand you, I do not see the connections at the right picture. What connections are there?
So sorry, we don't have a very good connection, good picture resolution here. But if you could look closer, you would see lots and lots and lots of threads between people here. Yeah. Now this one will help. Better, right? Okay. So I came with this other picture, so you can really understand, okay? And it looks very much like, I mean, not just looks very much, it works exactly like in our brain. Okay, it self-assembles. I don't have a cell, a CEO cell in my brain, and then VP cells, and so on. It doesn't work this way. It self-assembles. It looks like chaotic, and it has chaos in it, but chaos means some kind of emergent organization and complexity, okay? So we see more and more of these structures that begin to overcome and even overrule more and more pyramidal collective intelligence. And in this very period of our history, we see on one side, you know, the conventional nation-state administration, companies doing the, you know, very top-down command and control, super centralized because of the super concentration of money that we have today that we've never seen ever before. We have a concentration of money in the hand of the few that never before in human history today. That means the level of power held by a few people like never ever in human history before. But at the same time, we see more and more people self-organizing and making this claim that we can build global and local organizations that don't need any kind of centralized power. But that requires not just technology. It requires also an inner shift, and I would like to go into this a little bit. Do you follow me? Everyone okay? Just doing a time check also? Okay, good. We do good. So, where I would like to go, I will explain a few more things about this holomidal collective intelligence, and I would like to go with you to the fact that moving into this new kind of social organization does not just happen with the external. It will happen also with a deep inner shift, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. But back to holomidal collective intelligence, let's think about Oroville. Oroville works typically in this kind of transition point where it has to grow, it has something local and global, and it definitely doesn't want to become pyramidal. Because we all know that becoming pyramidal can work, but at the cost and at the loss of individual freedom and individual sovereignty. And what we observe in this world through sociological studies, we see the rise of individuation. Every possible sociological study show that more and more human beings want to individualize, to find themselves, to exist as a free human being. Okay, good, but how do we make a society out of that? That creates lots and lots of social complexity. And if we can't have pyramids anymore, how do we do that? And we have this question for Oroville. We have an expanding population trying to find ways not to fall back into the pyramidal that has certainly loss of efficiency, but has a very important human cost. But then how do we do distributed networks? And it doesn't come only from technology, but let's look at what we know a little bit from these new social organisms. If we look at Oroville, you will see that it has an extended community all across the world, okay? And in this extended community, you have a smaller community that we can call community of action. That means people doing something, maybe Orovillians or people supporting Oroville, giving money, coming 3 months a year to do something for Oroville and so on. And then you have what we call the learning community. That means people who say, I feel interested, I want to do something, and I want to improve my skills, my knowledge, and so on. Okay? And then you have a fourth subset, pioneers. People who say, I feel interested, I want to do something, I want to learn something, and I want to pioneer new possibilities. Every form of holomidal collective intelligence that you will see, whether we talk about Oroville or other organizations, Wikipedia, or questions about solar energy or permaculture, or any topic that goes into holomidal structure, you will see those four things playing together as one signature. Okay. We also have some sociological studies about that. We've seen more and more rules emerging in any kind of Holomidal organization, and I bet you can find some, maybe even find yourself somewhere on this map. You will see people who facilitate the flow of information. You will see people who connect people with other people. You will see people who, like pathfinders, who explore, the pioneers who go into new possibilities. You will see people who disrupt, who try to, challenge what we take as granted, and so on. You will see also outside some people who advocate, some people who testify, and so on and so on. So we start to have some good knowledge about this Holomidal collective intelligence. We know that we have more and more individualized people. They need interconnection, local and global. They need to practice social aware and community aware at some point to deal with social complexity. And they also go for open innovation, very important. They want to share resources, they want to integrate new ecosystems. That makes a lot and lots of complexity. And they try to find how can we build those next organizations, exactly like Auroville. And they also have a spiritual path. All these things, I see it in a super densified way in Auroville, but I see it all across the planet, happening everywhere. People wanting to make new companies, to build new forms of energy, to build new forms of currencies, whatever, so many things. And one last thing about that, this form of Holomidal collective intelligence cannot work with money, with conventional money. It can't. Because if you inject conventional money into that, you will get, again, like in the Monopoly game, you will get what? Right, concentration of power, again. And now we enter into maybe the most fleshy part, and now maybe more also personal part about collective intelligence. So I wanted first to share with you this first part, maybe, a little heavy stuff or theoretical stuff, for you first to understand the foundations of collective intelligence, how this works, and now we go into the very juicy, fleshy part that we call invisible architectures. So how does it work? Why did we decide to gather here in this room? Why did we choose this architecture? Because this architecture works well for a gathering like this one, for instance. We can put chairs, we can move around, it has lots of possibilities, okay? We didn't do that in a restaurant, or we didn't do that near the street, on the street, or we didn't do that outdoor, because architecture, this kind of architecture facilitates a specific kind of social emergence. Just like a hospital facilitates healing, a restaurant facilitates eating, and so on. A school facilitates a place for learning, okay? So architecture, physical architecture, works for some specific kind of social emergence, okay? Now, we could certainly do lots of other things in this building. Maybe we can eat, but more likely we'll have meetings in this building, okay? And in a restaurant, you may have a spiritual experience, but more likely you will have it in a cathedral or in a spiritual center, and so on, okay? So, visible architecture. Now, let me talk about invisible architecture. I already shared one with you. Money. So what I witness in the world, I see lots of people, they have a fantastic project. We want distributed power. We want to build open democracy. We want to share resources. We don't want centralized top-down command and control. We will build practice for that. We want clean energy. And we use money. Good luck. Good luck. Because money eventually will concentrate in the hands of the few, not because of human greediness, but just because of the Pareto effect, just because of a physical law. And most people don't get it. They think, human greediness and all these things, but they forget that it also has behind a law. And that law of concentration does trigger human greediness. But before human greediness, you have this law of concentration inside money. Very important to remember that. So here I speak about the first kind of invisible architecture of people having done amazing personal development. They have beautiful projects. They really go for the journey. They give everything they have, and they use money. Well, eventually they will have to deal with concentration of power. Remember the Monopoly game? Imagine that we put around the Monopoly game, we put the wisest people we know on Earth. And why not, you know, Sri Aurobindo and the mother, and who else? And Dalai Lama, and Donald Trump, and no, maybe not the Trump. Okay, another one. Anyway, super wise people, and that includes yourself. And all that you have to do, you just have to play the game. Just buy and sell things. You don't need to do it in a mean way. Just do commerce with others. Nothing bad about that, right? Well, regardless, the spiritual practice and the individual intention of everyone, the system will go into a bankrupt. And you will have rich and poor. And your personal wisdom will serve for nothing unless you change the rules. You can change the rules, but if you play by the rules, the Pareto effect will apply. You want to build a beautiful business where everyone benefits from integral wealth, and you will struggle with the scarce money. And that may destroy your beautiful business because you still operate with the conventional money. So you see, invisible architecture. That means it works like old DNA, a scarcity view of the world, a scarcity dynamics of the world that we inject into anything new that we want to do. And I would like to come up with other examples. Yes?
What about, like, Sounds True? An American publishing house for spiritual, it's based on money, but it's often cited, like by Lalu and stuff, as really one of the companies, and there are others that are really, to lack of better words, very advanced.
Right.
Still
Yes.
using smart. I'm curious how much more that.
Yes, and we see many intentional communities and intentional cities. I mean, they use conventional money, but they can put their spiritual force and their practice against the stream of scarcity. Like they say, we do by donation only, things like that, which, by the way, Auroville does in most cases. But they still struggle. Now, I've chosen myself, as I said, to live in the gift economy. So I still use conventional money. And I still have to face the scarcity model as well. I don't struggle because I've learned with a spiritual practice and practical ways to overcome that. But it took me many, many years to become stronger myself than the Pareto effect, okay? But it took me years, and I would really enjoy, and I will enjoy, the day when I can play and live in the gift economy with another system where I don't have to, to have this exceptional amount of practice, because you don't want everyone to do that, to go to this level of practice. Does that answer your question? Yeah? Okay. So, yeah, another example. I spoke earlier about language. Language. If you think of language, well, we realize, we think that humankind began to speak about 60,000 years ago. That makes quite a long time, okay? And very likely, the language that we have today still contain lots and lots of the early archaic structures from old time, 10,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, and so on, okay? And they still exist in our semantic structures, okay? So it raises a question, because when I speak, if I want to describe a new project, a new company, a new society, a new order, a new something, but I do it with a language that works as a layer of very old things, very ancient things, very ancient worldviews, very ancient structures of consciousness, then the language I speak may inject in the new lots of the old. And I will give examples of that. Have you noticed that I speak a different English than conventional English? I've taken out something very important. Some of you know, of course, but if you don't know, have you noticed something? Sorry?
You have avoided I, me.
Well, I think I just said I have changed something.
Non, français, tu parles sans accent anglais.
Je ne parle pas avec l'accent anglais. Okay, I have removed the verb to be. I don't use the verb to be anymore. I know I have not pronounced the verb to be since I speak with you. Sometimes I'll still make a mistake. Not in French. In French, I don't make mistakes anymore. In English, yes, still a little bit. So why would I do that? If I say Auroville is fantastic, or if I say Auroville is late in progress, or Auroville is this, or Pondicherry is a polluted city, or India is, or the French are, or whatever, you know. When I say is or are, I impose a reality onto you. It is like this. You have no choice. It is, okay? And so it has a consequence, what I call ordinary violence, embedded in language. So we say it every day, all the time, morning to evening, so we don't even notice this small little violence embedded in language, archaic forms of consciousness embedded in language. Because I push a reality onto you, and it has a second consequence on me as well. Because when I speak, in my own narrative, I don't produce a narrative where I see myself, where I experience myself as the producer of my feelings, of my thoughts, of my experience. Let me say it again. In my narrative, I don't create a narrative in which I see myself as the producer of my experience. When I say things are, I give to myself the illusion that they are independently of me as an observer, because they are. Now, if I start to say, I notice that, I feel that, I think that, I have the opinion that, then I start to build a narrative where I speak from the I perspective and I take responsibility for what I see from my place as an observer, and I can offer that to you. I cannot impose that, I can only share it with you. But if I say things are, then I impose it to you. So it may look kind of trivial, you know, because, you know, you and I can go to the movie and we see this movie and I say, wow, this movie was great, and you say, oh no, it was terrible. And we start arguing a little bit, you know, no big deal, friends, you know. But when it comes about big questions, those of Auroville or those of nation states, you know, things that are and are not, immigration, nationality, GMOs, food, you know, things like that, health, then we see wars and genocides for the things that, for people arguing with things that are and things that are not, things that are true and things that are not true, things that are right and things that are not right. You know, we see that all the time. And so we see how language has embedded archaic structures. Now I speak about English, and I do the same in French. I speak F', a derivative of French, and I speak in E', a derivative of English, E for English, because removing the verb to be, or removing the verb être in French, really helps make a new step, an evolutionary step. It doesn't solve everything, but it makes us make a significant step. And I'd like to come now to this concept of what we call the hacking. Hacking means you take the existing and you transform it, you hack it to your advantage. So you may have a computer with some software, you can hack the software and make a better software, a better operating system. You have a car, you take the engine, you can hack it and make it something to produce electricity, for instance. You know, hacking means you take with what you have. And I do all these things in the spirit of go hack yourself. Go hack yourself. That means you take what you have of the collective, like a language, and you can hack the operating system and make something better. It speaks to a state of mind. Okay? So now we go into a more personal sphere, and that will lead to the second part of our meeting right now. We'll get some drinks a little bit before. But it speaks to this collective that goes through us, like goes through me like a language. I may have done tons of personal development. If I still speak the same collective language, I will reproduce the worldviews embedded in this language. I may have done tons of personal development, and I still use conventional money. I will inject in my project the scarcity model, no matter what. I may have done lots and lots of personal development, and if I still play by the same social codes, it will inject the same old society again and again. Here we talk about invisible architectures. Invisible architectures, okay? So I shared this example with E' English, like suppressing the verb to be helps remove a good amount of ordinary violence in the language. And it has lots and lots of other benefits. For instance, to be or not to be. Binary. Do we really think that things are or are not? Maybe it has a little more in between as well. So I noticed that when I say, rather than saying Peter is shy, if I say I met Peter yesterday and I found him shy, I start to speak more about impermanence. From my point of view.
In the question, is Peter shy? With the question, is that the same? You're using are.
It still creates some struggle, and you will see it has different intensities. Sometimes, keeping the verb to be doesn't make much of a struggle, but if I say, is Peter shy? The isness also makes a kind of definite state. He is shy forever. If I say, I found him shy this morning, it has a very different taste, because I speak from my point of view. Maybe you have a different experience, and it happened this morning in the circumstances and so on. So I noticed that removing the verb to be, I went into a much more subtle language that speaks more about things in an impermanent way from a point of an observer. And it has, again, other consequences. For instance, people may say, I am French, I am Indian, I am an engineer, I am a homeless, I am this or that. And so it makes the verb to be what we call an ontological bridge. That means you become the external tag. You start to believe that your inner essence becomes French or Indian or whatever, okay? Because this verb says something about your inner self, the beingness, the inner self. But because you say, I am this or I am that, you reduce yourself to this thing and you become that thing. You train your brain to identify yourself to external tags, and that creates separation. So, if you remove in English the verb to be, you won't solve everything, but wow, you will solve a good bunch of issues with others. I speak from experience. I've started to speak in EPRAM a few years ago, and I have seen that it shifted many, many things first with myself, in the way I would describe the world, but also with others. And doing that, I speak about collective intelligence, because I speak about something collective called the language. When I speak about money, I speak about something collective called the currency. And that has a collective, individual and collective impact. Let me take a third example of invisible architecture, and then we'll make a break. Years ago, I also decided I would hack some social codes. One social code, actually. So what do I mean by social code? Social code means the way we say hi, the way we eat, the way we dress, the way we walk, all the kind of behaviors that put us in the right place in society. If we don't follow social codes, sometimes it may have some consequences. For instance, if I take off my clothes right now and I go walk in the streets, it will have some very, very strong consequences on me. Okay, well, we'll see a very strong response. Okay, just taking the clothes off, not a big deal, right? Not attacking people or anything, but it will have consequence. So, just dressing, for instance, speaks about social code. Okay, social codes also exist, each of them, to preserve a certain order, given the current today's order. All of them have a function. No social code exists randomly. They all have a history, they all have a reason to exist. But basically, they maintain the current social order. They serve for that as conventions, okay? So I noticed when people speak that in most cultures, they interrupt one another, or they just speak right after another. And interestingly, we have expressions in English like to take the floor. In French, prendre la parole. So you take something for you, okay? And then I thought, interesting, because I see for myself, if I want to go in some state of wisdom, if I want to allow wisdom to operate through me, I need some silence. Maybe I will speak sometimes, I need some silence. But what about a group? If everyone speaks boom, 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 right after one another and interrupt one another, how can wisdom come into this room? So I decided, okay, rather than advocating anything to people, I'll practice for myself, and I will speak after one deep, long breath. And I've practiced that for years now. I don't do it all the time, in casual conversation, hello, how are you, blah, 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 those things, and would you pass me the salt? I don't need to, or do you have time? What time do you have? And wait. So, okay, no, I don't do that, okay. But each time we enter in conversation, when I feel that, then I start to do this one long breath. So what do you think this deep, long breath could offer? What gifts could a deep, long breath offer before speaking? Yes?
I was just wondering, are you familiar with the Orang Sini tribe in Malaysia? It's one of the sub-tribes.
Yes.
But they have no language structure to be able to say you are. And I can't remember her name, I wouldn't write a book about it. But recently, it's a very tragic story of 4 children from this tribe who were mandated by the government to end the education system. And they were completely shocked by the violence of the education system. And in fact, the tragedy was they ran into the bush and they all died of starvation.
So yeah, we go back into then the language thing. And all languages have some archaic structures in them. Some languages, like Arabic, for instance, don't have the verb to be. But just the way you place words will say the beingness of things. And my point here consists in inviting us, whatever language we speak, Hindi, Tamil, or any language, to track and detect the archaic structures that this specific language may have that keep us in the past. And for instance, lots of, every tribal culture that I have explored, original collective intelligence, for instance, don't have ontologies, don't have language structure to talk about linear time. They don't know what linear time means, like, in 5 years and 6 months and 3 days. Those things don't exist. So that incapacitates them to go into the good sides of what pyramidal collective intelligence has accomplished. It has developed lots of ontological structures that no original collective intelligence in the past could have. They had a circular perception of time. Because what you perceive with your sense, you perceive the moon, you perceive the night, the day, and the cycles, and life, and death, and seasons, and all these things, okay? So, my point here, the different forms of collective intelligence have built language that represent them. And we have a language for pyramidal collective intelligence, regardless whether we speak Chinese or English or French or whatever. That language will unconsciously perpetuate the social DNA. And one thing that I didn't say, and thank you for your question, one thing that I didn't say, if we go back to this, you see pyramidal collective intelligence can work. It has some costs. One of the things that you will see in the world of pyramidal collective intelligence, you will see people highly developed, super developed in the doing, and super underdeveloped in the being. No school will ever support them in the being. If they want to go in the being, they have to take on their own journey. They can. But you will see very poor institutional support in pyramidal collective intelligence societies in the being. Why? We have a very simple explanation, very kind of common sense. Those things I said work with chains of command. If you want a functional chain of command, you need predictable people. How can you have predictable people if people start to go in their being? That makes completely unpredictable people. You want to do what your being tells you to do. Well, this morning you want to do something else. You want to write poetry. You want to stay with your partner. You want to go to the beach. You want to work hard. Whatever. You will follow your own flow. Like a 5-year-old person does that. But we take this 5-year-old person, put that person on a bench at school, and for years and years, sit down. Don't listen to your emotions, your inner thoughts. Listen to the teacher, and don't talk to your neighbor, by the way. Okay? And you do that amount of training, and 10 years, 15 years, 20 years later, you have a predictable person. Through morals, through ethics, through religion, whatever, kind of external matrix, and mostly through language. And the to-be language creates a very, very strong separation between inside the being. Because when we think things are outside, that separates you from yourself. You see the very vicious kind of circle? So, sorry, your question really took me kind of further down the road, but I think it helps. And now go back to social codes. So I said, I shared with you, I decided years ago that I would not speak without one deep, long breath. So my question, what would a deep, long breath offer as a gift? Why would we do that? Yes?
Gives us time to really hear what the other says.
So it gives us time to really hear. Yeah.
Or respond to it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I will repeat what you said so that everyone can hear. Yes?
It connects you to yourself.
It connects you to yourself. Mm-hmm.
And to the other.
Sorry?
And also to the other.
And to the other, yes?
Comes in the present.
Right, it brings you into the present. Yes? Mm-hmm. Anything else?
Well, it says something new may happen to you in that silence that you were not already going to say.
Yes.
You have to realize what you are going to say is very relevant to the topic or very
Right.
it's bringing something else or not.
Right. Yes.
Similar to self-connectivity, where you notice your reaction.
Right. So as you bet, I have asked this same question a countless number of times, and we all know it, the benefits of silence. But why don't we do it in our conversations? Interesting. Why do we keep following the same social code that allows to speak boom, 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 right after one another, and also to interrupt? When I interrupt someone, it means on a psychological level, not from a judgmental level, it means that what I have to say becomes more important than what the others have to say if I interrupt. I go in that kind of consciousness. I become more important in this moment, okay? And we allow that socially. Interesting. Now what if we start to breathe before speaking? You said it. You recenter, you align with yourself, you connect with your body, you connect with your emotions, you connect with the other's emotion. You switch off the automated pilot, because the mental works on automated pilot, it speaks from what it knows. You switch it off. What you wanted to say, you can put it aside, You meditate for one deep long breath, and maybe you will take it back and say it, but it will come from a different place, always. And you allow inspiration, you allow for channeling. All these things may happen during this one deep long breath or two breaths or even more kind of meditation. And when a group starts to practice that, start to breathe before speaking, then we bring silence, a good balance between silence and engagement within the group. And that shifts the whole thing. Because whether we like it or not, I talk about common sense here. If we want wisdom in a group, the group somehow will have to include silence in it. Otherwise, no wisdom will ever come. We'll start to just ping pong and operate from common knowledge and all these things, and to react, as you shared earlier. So, hacking the social code, hacking the operating system of social codes, like just touching this one simple gene, speaking right after another, interrupting someone, change that and replace it with breathe before speaking. That can shift the whole thing. And we do that with, we started to do that with some groups in Auroville, and that changed the whole thing. People make different decisions. They think at the beginning, when they begin that, they have this whole list of topics, and if they start breathing and lots of moments of silence, they will never go through the whole list. But sooner or later, they realize that they have accomplished more because of this silence, because they don't need to go in the long yes, but blah, 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 blah. Because when they engage, they had time to reflect. And when they engage, they had time to listen. So they take in more. And then they realize that they can also connect to their greater self, not just their little self. And some of them can even start to have supramental experience, not inside the matrimandir or in a meditative state, but while engaged with others, just because we shifted one social code. So it shows the power of invisible architecture. Yes?
It's more a biological code than a social code. Because when I'm upset, I'm immediately reacting. And it's not social, it's even against me.
True, absolutely true. If we put a scanner on the brain, if we speak right after one another with no space for silence, I activate my limbic system, because language happens in the limbic system, and then the reptilian brain when I start to react. If you speak back to me in a meeting room, my focus will start to narrow down onto you. I will forget about the others. I will have the same physiological response like if a tiger attacks me. Maybe I don't move the same way, but the hormonal systems will work the same way, the trains of thought will work the same way, so it provokes a whole train of thoughts. Absolutely right. So it has biological consequences. And if I start to breathe, I put oxygen in my brain, and I activate the prefrontal part. So it means I also process, and I do an evolutionary biological process as well. Totally right, yes. So when people start to do that together, that shifts the whole thing. And with some people in Auroville, we have begun, maybe you will want to share some of your experience after that, about changing this kind of social code. It has huge consequences. Very simple thing, but huge consequences. So a question for, maybe now we go for the pause. Let me just check the time. Yeah. I propose that we have, 15 minutes break? Yes? Okay, for some tea and conversation. And after that, we can continue and go into a much more interactive, talk about those invisible architecture. Okay with that? See you in 15?
20 to 6, back in the room, please.
Okay.